What if the future of AI isn't shaped by engineers, but by lawmakers? From Washington to Brussels to Beijing, global powers are writing the rules of artificial intelligence. Let's unpack how and why in this deep dive podcast.
Welcome to the Deep Dive, where we cut through the noise to get you truly well-informed. Artificial intelligence, well, it isn't some far-off dream anymore, is it? It's intricately woven into our daily lives. Think about how you stream shows, or even how complex medical diagnostics are powered. But here's the fascinating challenge. AI is everywhere, but figuring out how to govern it, that's a global puzzle, and the pieces are shifting constantly. Today, we're taking a comprehensive deep dive into how three major global players, the United States, the European Union, and China, are tackling AI regulation. It's complex, it's evolving fast, and we've boiled down the crucial insights so you don't have to wade through, dense policy papers.
That's exactly right. Our mission here is to pull out the most important nuggets of knowledge from the sources you shared. We want to help you clearly understand the different regulatory frameworks these places are building, who's responsible for enforcing them, the big differences. And yeah, some genuinely surprising similarities, too. We'll even look ahead, trying to anticipate the trends for AI governance between, say, 2025 and 2030. We know these documents can be incredibly dense, really tough legal and policy stuff, so we're here to give you a clear, plain language summary to make sense of it all.
Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the United States. Because when it comes to AI regulation, the U.S. has taken a really distinct path compared to, well, many other global powers.
Indeed. It's quite different. Unlike places that might draft one big overarching AI law, the United States currently lacks that single piece of comprehensive federal legislation. Instead, it's relying on what you could really call a patchwork.
A patchwork, right?
Yeah, patchwork of existing laws, various agency guidelines, and, increasingly individual state legislation.
And it's been quite a journey getting even to this patchwork, hasn't it? We saw federal initiatives like the National Artificial Intelligence Initiative Act back in January 2021. That seemed focused on boosting AI R&D, right? Really emphasizing innovation over strict rules.
That's a good way to put it. Innovation was definitely the focus there.
Then, October 2022, the White House releases this blueprint for an AI Bill of Rights. Sounds important.
It outlined 5 key ethical principles, things like bias protection, transparency. Very important ideas. But, this is crucial, it was not legally enforceable. It was more like a policy vision, a set of ideals for developers and policymakers to aim for.
Okay, so ideals but no teeth yet. And then things got really dynamic, didn't they? October 2023, President Biden's executive order on safe, secure, and trustworthy AI. That sounded pretty comprehensive.
It was significant, yes. A broad directive telling federal agencies to get involved, covering everything from cybersecurity standards to consumer protection in AI. A big move.
But then, whiplash. January 2025, a new administration, President Trump, basically rescinds that order.
Exactly, a dramatic shift. The new executive order, called Removing Barriers to AI, signals a very clear change in direction. It tells agencies to prioritize AI leadership, reverse rules seen as restrictive. It really reflects a move towards a, let's say, more permissive federal stance, hoping to spur innovation.
Wow, okay, so federal policy is kind of swinging back and forth.
The federal pendulum is definitely something to watch. But while that's happening in D.C., something else significant is emerging. State-level AI laws.
Ah, yes, like Colorado.
Precisely. The Colorado AI Act, enacted May 2024, takes effect in 2026. And that's a landmark. It's the first comprehensive state-level AI law in the U.S. It puts specific duties on developers and companies using high-risk AI.
High risk, like what kind of things?
Think AI used in education decisions, employment screening, loan applications areas with major consequences for people. It mandates things like bias testing and transparency about how these systems work. And other states, California, New York, they're actively looking at similar bills. So this patchwork is getting, well, patchier and more complex.
So, okay, no single federal AI executive orders changing. Who's actually the cop on the beat for AI right now? Who regulates this stuff?
That's a great question because there isn't one specific federal AI regulator. It falls to existing agencies. The Federal Trade Commission, the FTC, for instance. They're using their existing powers to police AI
How so?
under consumer protection laws. They're warning companies, hey, you can't sell biased AI products that deceive or harm people. They're looking at fairness, transparency. Then you have the Department of Justice and the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. They enforce anti-discrimination laws. So if AI in hiring is biased, they can step in.
Right, using existing civil rights laws.
Exactly. And then there's NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technology. They create really important voluntary standards, like their AI risk management framework. Very influential. But it's vital to remember, NIST is not a regulator. They provide guidelines, best practices, not enforceable rules.
Okay, so if I'm a company using AI in the US, what does this patchwork actually mean for, like, getting in trouble? Is it enforceable?
It definitely means you're accountable, even without one big federal law. Many federal efforts are policy frameworks, true, not directly binding law in themselves. However, if your AI system breaks existing laws, say, it discriminates in lending, violating Fair Lending Acts, or makes false advertising claims, then regulators can enforce consequences. And they do.
So the FTC has actually taken action.
Yes, the FTC has already brought enforcement actions related to AI claims and data use, and at the state level, those laws like Colorado's. Once they're effective, they will be legally binding. State attorneys general will have the power to investigate and penalize companies that don't comply. So, while it's not a single law, it's definitely not the Wild West, there are real legal risks.
Right. So summing up the U.S. approach for you, our listener, it's cautious, it's piecemeal, it emphasizes innovation, relies a lot of voluntary best practices. Legal enforcement often happens indirectly using existing laws, privacy, consumer protection, civil rights. Companies have to navigate this growing mix of state rules and agency actions. But yeah, for now, there's more flexibility compared to having one broad federal mandate.
Okay, now let's pivot sharply. Because here's where it gets really interesting, especially compared to what we just discussed about the US, the European Union. They've gone for a much more proactive, comprehensive approach.
Absolutely. A completely different philosophy, really. The centerpiece, the big one, is the EU Artificial Intelligence Act. This is landmark stuff. It was adopted June 2024, entered into force August 1st, 2024, and it becomes mandatory across the EU in 2026.
Mandatory in 2026. Wow.
Yeah, though some specific bans kick in even sooner, like February 2025. Yeah. This really makes it the world's first broad AI statute.
And the core idea is this risk-based framework, right? Can you break that down for us? What does that actually mean? Certainly. It basically categorizes AI systems based on the potential level of harm they might cause. It's like a pyramid of risk. At the very top, you have outright bans. Systems deemed an unacceptable risk are just forbidden.
Like what? What's unacceptable?
Think government-run social scoring systems that rank citizens, or AI designed to manipulate people's behavior in harmful ways, especially vulnerable groups. That kind of thing is banned outright. Then below that, you have the high-risk AI categories. This is a big focus.
Okay, high risk. What falls in there?
Systems used in critical areas. Things like AI in critical infrastructure management, employment and hiring decisions, law enforcement tools, medical devices, educational assessments. Areas where failure or bias has serious consequences. These high-risk systems face very strict requirements before they can even be put on the market or used.
Trick
Like mandatory risk assessments, really high standards for data quality, detailed documentation, transparency requirements so users understand how they work, and crucially, human oversight. There needs to be a human involved. Plus, they have to be registered in a central EU database.
An EU database? Okay. And what about less risky AI, like, say, a chatbot?
Right. For less risky AI, like general-purpose chatbots or AI generating images, the rules are much lighter. Mostly it's about transparency. Disclosing that content is AI-generated, providing summaries of copyrighted data used for training. It's a tiered system. The higher the risk, the tougher the rules.
Those requirements for high-risk AI sound pretty demanding. What happens if companies don't comply? What are the penalties?
This is where the EU AI Act really shows its teeth. It's designed to be highly enforceable for the most serious violations, especially involving banned practices or non-compliance for high-risk systems. The fines are massive. Up to 35 million or 7% of a company's total worldwide annual turnover for the preceding financial year, whichever figure is higher.
7% of global turnover. Wow, that's eye-watering.
Exactly. That's an attention-grabbing figure. It means compliance isn't optional. It has to be baked into the design and deployment from the start. It's not just an afterthought. And it's worth remembering the General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, which came in back in May 2018, is also a huge factor. It already sets rules for personal data and automated decisions, laying some groundwork for AI governance.
And the Act doesn't just set rules, it also creates a whole new governance structure in Europe for AI, right?
Yes, a pretty robust one. There's a central EU AI office housed within the European Commission. Its job is to ensure the act is applied consistently across all member states. Then there's a multinational European AI board, which brings together representatives from all the national authorities. And each member state will have its own national supervisory authority responsible for enforcing the act locally. Some countries, like Spain, were even proactive and set up their national AI agencies early.
Okay, and here's a key question that always comes up with big EU regulations like GDPR. Does this AI Act apply to companies outside the EU?
Yeah.
That extraterritorial scope?
It absolutely does. That's a critical point. Just like GDPR, the AI Act has extraterritorial scope. So even if your company is based in the US or Asia or anywhere else, if you place an AI system on the EU market or if its use affects people within the EU, you must comply with the EU AI Act.
Right, so no hiding outside the borders.
No hiding. It mirrors that tough GDPR enforcement model. It really underlines the EU's goal here, aiming for human-centric ethical AI and actively trying to set a global benchmark, hoping other regions might follow their lead.
Okay, fascinating contrast with the US. Now let's turn our attention to China, because their approach to AI governance, well, it really stands out, again, quite different from both the US and the EU.
Oh, absolutely. China has taken a remarkably aggressive, very top-down strategy for governing AI, and it's incredibly closely tied to their national strategic goals, becoming a global leader in technology, but also, crucially, maintaining social stability. That's a key driver.
So top-down and linked to national goals, how does that translate into actual rules?
Well, unlike the US patchwork or the EU's single big law, China tends to issue a rapid series of very detailed administrative regulations and standards. And these are not just guidelines. They are legally binding, and they're enforced by powerful government agencies. The overall vision was laid out way back in July 2017 in their New Generation AI Development Plan. That plan set the huge goal for China to be the world leader in AI by 2030 and explicitly called for building a governance system to ensure AI is safe, controllable, and ethical, according to their definition.
And they've been incredibly fast with rulemaking, haven't they? It seems like as soon as a new AI tech emerges, like recommendation algorithms or deepfakes, boom, there's a regulation.
That's precisely it. They move very quickly. Take the administrative provisions on recommendation algorithms effective March 1st, 2022. That was genuinely one of the world's first laws specifically targeting algorithms. It requires platforms to register their algorithms, let users opt out, and this is quite unique. It explicitly prohibits algorithms from doing things that endanger national security or social order. They even have to promote positive energy.
Promote positive energy. Wow, okay. What else?
Then came the administrative provisions on deep synthesis services, basically, deepfakes, effective January 10th, 2023. This mandates that any AI-generated or significantly altered content must be clearly labeled as such. The goal is to prevent deception and maintain a healthy cyberspace. And then more recently, responding to things like ChatGPT, they issued the interim measures for the management of generative AI services, effective August 15th, 2023.
China's first specific rule for generative AI.
Yes, and it requires these services to ensure their outputs align with socialist values, maintain content safety through filtering and other means, and undergo security assessments. Importantly, the providers are held legally accountable for the content their AI generates.
So accountability is high. What's the underlying legal framework for all these specific AI rules?
A lot of it builds on two major laws that came into effect in 2021. China's Personal Information Protection Law, or PIPL, which is kind of their equivalent to GDPR, and the Data Security Law. These provide the legal backbone. They include principles like transparency and fairness for automated decision-making using personal data, and they come with serious penalties. Fines can reach up to 5% of a company's annual revenue, and there's even the possibility of criminal charges for severe violations.
Okay, serious consequences. And
Yeah.
who enforces all this? Is there one main AI regulator in China?
The Cyberspace Administration of China, the CST, is effectively the lead regulator for AI. They are very powerful. But they often work jointly with other ministries, like the Ministry of Industry and Information Technology, MIIT. or the Ministry of Public Security. It's a highly centralized structure which allows for very swift and direct regulatory intervention when they deem it necessary.
So what's the most striking difference then when you compare China's approach to the US and the EU? What really jumps out?
I think the key difference is the explicit focus. While the EU centers on fundamental rights and the US on innovation and risk mitigation within existing frameworks, Chinese regulations explicitly prioritize preserving social stability and national security. This leads to very strict rules about the content AI can generate or promote, outputs that could cause political dissent, challenge socialist values, or create social unrest are heavily scrutinized and restricted. So, alongside technical requirements, these political and moral criteria are fundamental benchmarks for enforcement. It's a very distinct set of priorities driving the regulations.
And enforceability. Are these just rules on paper, or do they really bite?
Oh, they definitely bite. These regulations are legally backed and highly enforceable. The authorities can take swift administrative actions, things like ordering services to be suspended, demanding rectifications, imposing those heavy fines we mentioned, and yes, even pursuing criminal charges in serious cases. It's a very robust and direct regulatory environment.
Okay, so we've got these three very different pictures. The U.S. patchwork, the comprehensive EU Act, China's state-led controls. What's fascinating now is laying them side by side. How do they line up, or where do they really clash when you look at the bigger picture?
Right, let's try to systematically compare them. First, the overall regulatory approach. The EU and China are clearly more interventionist and comprehensive. The EU achieves this with its single horizontal AI Act covering all sectors based on risk. China does it through multiple rapidly issued domain-specific regulations targeting new technologies. This really contrasts with the US's patchwork measures, which rely more on adapting existing laws and, increasingly, state-level initiatives.
Okay, approach is different. What about the legal force behind them?
Big difference there, too. Legal binding force. EU and Chinese regulations are explicitly binding. They have dedicated enforcement mechanisms and, as we discussed, potentially huge fines. The EU's 7% of global turnover, China's 5% of revenue or even criminal charges. The US federally mostly enforces indirectly through existing laws. Violate consumer protection or anti-discrimination law using AI and you'll face penalties. But the AI rules themselves, like the blueprint, weren't directly binding, although those emerging state laws, like Colorado's, are binding.
Got it. And the focus, the main goals.
The scope and focus diverge significantly. The EU is laser-focused on fundamental rights and safety, really putting the human at the center. China, as we said, prioritizes content control and national security, including upholding socialist values. The US tries to balance innovation and risk mitigation, generally addressing harms after they occur while trying not to stifle development. And here's a stark example you mentioned from the sources. The EU explicitly forbids government social scoring. China uses social credit systems domestically, although, importantly, its AI rules do prohibit discriminatory scoring in commercial services.
That's a really clear contrast. What about how they categorize risk? Is it all risk-based or sectoral?
Good question. The EU framework is explicitly risk-based, applying its tiered rules across all sectors depending on the AI's potential harm. China is maybe somewhat hybrid. It issues tech-specific rules, like for algorithms or generative AI, but also incorporates elements of graded supervision based on impact. The U.S. is currently mostly sector-specific, meaning AI in finance is looked at by financial regulators, AI in healthcare by health regulators, using their existing sector-specific rules. But here's a commonality. All three do recognize that certain high-impact uses, think employment credit, healthcare law enforcement, needs special attention and oversight.
Okay, and the body's doing the regulating.
In terms of governance bodies, all three actually use multiple agencies. No single country has just one AI czar. However, China's structure is under a much more centralized command. The CAT has immense power, and regulators seem to intervene much more directly in company operations compared to what you typically see in the US or the EU.
So, okay, lots of fundamental differences in approach, focus, enforcement. But despite all that, are there areas where they surprisingly agree?
Any convergence? Yes, and this is maybe the most fascinating part. Despite these radically different political systems and regulatory philosophies, there are some truly surprising areas of convergence, particularly around core ethical principles. All three regions, in their own ways, emphasize promoting fairness, transparency, and accountability in AI systems.
How so? Can you give examples?
Well, you see it in the principles outlined in the U.S. AI Bill of Rights, even if non-binding. You see it embedded throughout the EU AI Act's requirements for high-risk systems, like non-discrimination and explainability. And you see it in China's official ethical guidelines for AI development, which also call for fairness and transparency. There's also a shared emphasis across the board on the need for human oversight, especially in critical decision-making. The idea of a human in the loop appears in various forms in all three regulatory landscapes.
Okay, fairness, transparency, human oversight.
Yeah.
What else?
Privacy is another major shared concern. Obviously, the EU has GDPR, China has PPL, and while the US lacks a comprehensive federal privacy law, it's a constant theme in discussions and proposed legislation, and existing state laws touch on it. And maybe most importantly for individuals, all three systems are moving towards providing some form of redress mechanism if people are harmed by AI decisions. Whether it's a right to complain under the EU AI Act, using existing consumer protection channels in the US, or reporting issues directly to companies and regulators as mandated by some Chinese rules, there's a recognition that people need recourse.
So it suggests maybe a global baseline understanding of the core risks, even if the solutions differ wildly.
Exactly. It seems there's a global consensus emerging that AI needs guardrails around these core ethical issues, even if the implementation details and priorities vary dramatically.
So the bottom line of this comparison, maybe. The EU and China favor a more regulatory precautionary stance, setting explicit rules before potential harms occur, trying to shape the technology's development. The U.S., at least federally for now, leans towards an innovation-friendly stance, often addressing harms after they materialize through existing legal channels, prioritizing flexibility. But what's absolutely clear is that all three giants recognize AI poses significant societal risks that need managing. Okay, this is where it gets really interesting, I think, looking ahead. Peering into the crystal ball towards 2025, 2030, maybe even beyond. How are these three global players likely to continue shaping the future of AI governance? What's next?
Great question. Let's look at each region. For the United States, the trend seems to be moving, albeit slowly, toward more concrete federal AI regulation. We're seeing proposals like the Safe Innovation Framework, various AI accountability acts being discussed in Congress. There's even talk sometimes about creating a dedicated AI safety agency, maybe something analogous to the FDA for drugs.
A federal AI agency, that would be a big step.
It would. Whether it happens is another question, given the political landscape, but the conversation is happening. We can definitely expect more U.S. states to enact AI laws, following Colorado's lead. And ironically, this growing patchwork at the state level might actually pressure industry to lobby for a uniform federal law just to simplify compliance.
Right, avoiding 50 different sets of rules.
Exactly. We'll also likely see continued use of executive orders, depending on the administration, and NIST will surely keep updating its technical standards, perhaps tackling new issues like AI generating cybersecurity threats. And internationally, the U.S. will continue engaging in greater international coordination through platforms like the GPAI, Global Partnership on AI, and the G7's Hiroshima AI process.
Okay, so more federal discussion, more state action, international engagement for the U.S. What about the EU? They've just passed their big act.
For the European Union, the next few years are all about implementation, making the AI Act work effectively on the ground. That means issuing detailed guidance documents to clarify the rules, getting the EU AI office fully staffed and operational, and helping industry comply, maybe through things like regulatory sandboxes.
Sandboxes, what are those?
Basically, controlled environments where companies can test innovative AI systems under regulatory supervision before a full market launch. It helps work out kinks and ensure compliance. We'll almost certainly see the growth of an AI conformity assessment industry. Think auditors and consultants who specialize in certifying that AI systems meet the Act's requirements. And looking further out, a revival of discussions around an AI liability regime seems likely. They want to make it easier for individuals harmed by AI to seek compensation. And critically, the EU sees itself as a leader here. They will actively push their standards internationally, hoping to maintain that global benchmark status they achieved with GDPR.
Okay, implementation and global leadership for the EU and China. More rapid rules.
For China, absolutely expect continuous refinement and expansion of AI regulations. They'll likely target emerging areas where AI is rapidly deploying, like autonomous vehicles or AI in healthcare and finance. It's also plausible they might introduce a more overarching AI ethics law, or perhaps integrate AI governance principles more formally into their civil code to clarify things like liability for AI-caused harm. They will almost certainly maintain a tight rein on generative AI, possibly moving towards a formal licensing system for developers of large AI models to ensure content control. By 2030, China aims to have a very robust AI standardization system in place, complementing its regulations, and we can expect continued stringent oversight, potentially with even stiffer penalties if the current ones aren't deemed sufficient to ensure alignment with national goals.
So it sounds like all three are going to be very busy shaping their own paths. But despite those differences, are there any overarching converging trends you see across all three as we head towards 2030?
Yes, definitely. I think one major converging trend is a growing shared recognition of AI's global impact and the absolute necessity of some form of international cooperation or coordination. You see this reflected in calls from the UN for maybe a global AI regulatory body, and initiatives like the G7's Hiroshima AI process trying to find common ground on principles. The problems are global, so the thinking needs to be too. And another key thing, all regions are grappling with how to adapt to AI advances. They know the tech isn't standing still. Things like artificial general intelligence, AGI, are on the horizon. So they're all trying to build agile governance into their frameworks mechanisms to update rules and standards as the technology evolves, rather than setting something in stone that quickly becomes outdated.
Agility is key then. So ultimately, pulling it all together, by 2030, what kind of global regulatory landscape can we realistically expect?
I think by 2030, we can expect a significantly more mature global regulatory landscape than we have today. It won't be uniform, far from it, but the Wild West days will likely be over. AI developers pretty much everywhere will increasingly have to prioritize safety, ethics, and compliance right from the design stage. It'll become a fundamental cost of doing business. And hopefully, users, citizens, consumers will have clearer protections and more accessible ways to seek redress if they are negatively impacted by AI decisions.
That seems like a reasonable prediction. It leaves us with a big question, though, doesn't it?
It does. This really raises an important point for all of us to think about. As this global race for AI leadership heats up, what's going to win out? Will the practical need for innovation and interoperability eventually force these different regulatory systems to align more closely? Or will these fundamentally different underlying philosophies, the democratic approach of the EU and US, China's technocratic and authoritarian model, actually lead to the creation of distinct, potentially competing AI ecosystems by the end of the decade? With different rules, different values embedded in the tech, that's the big unknown.
A truly thought-provoking question to end on. What was the most surprising nugget or maybe the aha moment for you in exploring all this? We really hope this deep dive into the complex world of global AI regulation has given you a clearer map of this incredibly important and fast-moving territory. Thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to the next deep dive.
This episode was brought to you by ChatGPT Deep Research and Google NotebookLM. If you'd like to explore the research behind today's discussion, check out the interactive notebook linked in the description. Inside, you'll find a concise study guide to quickly understand the core laws and frameworks, a structured briefing document for a deeper summary of everything we covered, a helpful FAQ section that answers common questions about global AI policy, a visual timeline tracking key events from 2017 to 2030, and an intuitive mind map connecting the US, EU, and China's approaches to AI governance. All of it is organized and AI-powered, so you can navigate the topic with confidence. Thanks for listening. Stay curious.